The crash cart slammed into the wall. Blood spread across the linoleum in a widening pool. Dr. Marcus Tennant stood in the center of the emergency room at St. Aurora Medical Center, screaming at a woman in scrubs who didn't flinch. "You don't belong here," he spat, his voice cutting through the chaos of a dying patient. "Stand back before you make it worse." Hannah Blake didn't move. Her hands stayed steady. Her eyes tracked the monitors, the failing vitals, the trembling intern holding a scalpel wrong. She'd seen men bleed out in desert compounds while mortars shook the ground. This was Tuesday, but nobody in that room knew. They saw a quiet nurse. They missed the soldier. Before we go further, if you're watching this, stay until the end. Like this video, comment what city you're watching from, and let me know how far this story travels. Because what happened next? It shattered everything they thought they knew. The first time they tried to break her was a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Hannah transferred to St. Aurora. She'd been assigned to the ICU, third shift, the graveyard rotation nobody wanted. The kind of shift that ground people down until they quit or cracked. Dr. Tennant made sure she got it. "Blake," his voice carried across the nurse's station like a whip. "You're covering Bay 7 through 12 tonight, solo." Hannah looked up from her chart. 6 critical patients, alone. The standard was 2 nurses minimum for that wing. "That's not protocol," she said quietly. "Protocol is what I say it is." Tennant didn't look at her. He was scrolling through his phone, bored already. "Unless you can't handle it, in which case there's the door." Around them, the other nurses kept their heads down. Sarah Lim, a 15-year veteran, caught Hannah's eye and shook her head slightly. "Don't fight it." Hannah nodded once and took the assignment sheet. That night she ran the wing flawlessly. Every med on time, every alarm answered. When Mrs. Kapoor in Bay 9 went into respiratory distress at 2 a.m., Hannah intubated her with the kind of speed that came from doing it in the back of a Humvee while someone returned fire. She logged it all, documented every decision, signed off at 7 a.m. without a single incident report. Tennant barely glanced at the charts the next morning. "Sloppy," he said, tossing them back at her. "Do better." She did. And the next night, he gave her 8 patients. No. The breaking point came 3 weeks later during a staff meeting in the conference room. Tennant stood at the front, clicking through a presentation on ER efficiency metrics. The numbers were bad. Wait times up. Patient satisfaction down. Medication errors spiking. "We need to address," that Tennant said slowly, letting his eyes sweep the room, "the weak links." Hannah sat in the back row, pen in hand, taking notes like always. She saw it coming before he even turned. "Blake?" His finger pointed. "Stand up." She stood. "How many years of ER experience do you have?" 4 years active medical service, she said evenly. 18 months here in civilian emergency care. 4 years, Tennant smiled. It wasn't kind. "And yet somehow you're consistently behind on charting. Your patients complain you're cold. You don't collaborate with the team. Frankly, I'm not sure why we hired you." The room went silent. Hannah didn't blink. She'd been interrogated by insurgents who spoke better English than this man. She knew what real danger looked like. This wasn't it. "I complete every chart before end of shift," she said. "Patient satisfaction scores for my direct care average 4.6 out of 5, and I collaborate when collaboration improves patient outcomes. Is that right?" Tennant's voice dropped. "Then explain to me why Dr. Ramos filed a report last week saying you refused to follow his orders during a trauma case." Hannah's jaw tightened. She remembered that case. A motorcycle accident, massive internal bleeding. Ramos had ordered a medication that would have dropped the patient's already critical blood pressure into fatal territory. She'd questioned it once, quietly. He'd screamed at her to comply. She'd done it, but only after confirming the order 3 times and documenting her objection in the chart. The patient survived despite the call, not because of it. "I followed his orders," she said, after arguing with him in front of the patient's family. "I clarified a dosage that could have been lethal." "You undermined a physician." Tennant stepped closer. "In this hospital, nurses support doctors. They don't question them. If you can't do that, maybe you should consider whether this is the right place for you." Around the room, people stared at their laps. Sarah looked like she wanted to say something, but didn't. Hannah stood there, absorbing it. This was the game. Provoke her, make her react, get her to quit or give them cause to fire her. She sat back down without another word. After the meeting, Sarah caught up with her in the hallway. "Hannah, he's trying to push you out. Everyone knows it." "I know. So why stay?" Hannah paused at the stairwell door. "Because patients need someone who won't fold." The next 2 weeks were surgical in their cruelty. Tennant reassigned her to the worst cases: the belligerent drunks, the verbally abusive psych holds, the families who screamed at staff. He scheduled her for every holiday, every weekend, every shift that started at midnight or ended at dawn. He buried her in paperwork, then criticized her for falling behind. He assigned her to work with Dr. Ian Cross, a resident known for throwing instruments when he got frustrated. Cross lived up to his reputation. During a laceration repair, he barked at Hannah to hold a retractor. When she adjusted her angle to give him better visibility, he shoved her hand away. "Not like that. God, do you even know what you're doing?" She repositioned without comment, held it steady. Cross finished the sutures and walked out without a word of thanks. Later, he filed a complaint that she'd been unresponsive to direction. Hannah didn't defend herself. She just added it to the pattern she was documenting. Every incident, every reassignment, every impossible standard. She'd learned in the military that the best defense wasn't fighting back. It was building an airtight record. So she did, but the toll was visible. She stopped eating lunch, stopped chatting with the other nurses. At shift change, she'd hand off her patients and disappear. People started whispering that she was cracking, that she'd be gone within a month. Tennant thought so too. He started talking about her in the past tense. "When we replace Blake," he'd say casually in meetings, "we'll need someone who can actually handle the workload." Then the call came in. It was a Saturday evening, early October. The ER was running steady. Nothing critical, just the usual stream of twisted ankles and flu symptoms. Hannah was restocking a suture cart when the radio crackled. "St. Aurora, this is County Dispatch. Multiple vehicle collision on Highway 84. Mass casualty event, 12 victims inbound. ETA 4 minutes. The charge nurse, a woman named Patel, went pale. 12? We don't have capacity for 12. Tennant was in his office. Patel called him. He came out irritated, phone still in hand. "How bad?" "MVC with rollovers. Fire department says at least 3 critical, 5 serious, 4 minor. They're triaging on scene, but we're getting the worst of it." Tennant cursed under his breath. "Get everyone down here, now!" The next 3 minutes were controlled chaos. Nurses pulled crash carts. Residents prepped bays. The trauma attending, Dr. Lorna Hayes, arrived and started barking orders. Hannah moved to the supply room and started laying out IV kits, airway equipment, chest tubes. She didn't wait to be told. She just moved. The first ambulance hit the bay doors at exactly 4 minutes. Paramedics rushed in with a woman on a backboard, her face a mask of blood. GCS-10, hypotensive, suspected internal bleeding. Hayes took over immediately. Bay 3. Move. The second ambulance was right behind. Then the third. Bodies flooded in. Screaming families, overwhelmed medics. The ER turned into a war zone. And that's when the system started to fail. Bay 5's ventilator threw an error code. The oxygen line in Bay 2 kinked. A resident froze mid-intubation, hands shaking. Cross started yelling at a nurse who brought him the wrong gauge needle. Patel tried to coordinate, but the radios were overlapping and nobody could hear her. Hannah watched it all from the supply corner. She'd seen this before. Different country, different uniforms, same chaos. Tennant stood in the center of it, barking orders that nobody could follow because 3 people were talking over him. "Get me suction in Bay 4. Where's the goddamn blood bank? Someone find out who's working trauma surgery tonight." A monitor started alarming, then another, then 5 at once. "Somebody shut those off!" Cross screamed. Hannah stepped forward. She didn't raise her voice. She just moved into the center of the room and spoke in a tone that cut through the noise like a blade. "Stop." Everyone turned. "Dr. Hayes, take the penetrating chest trauma in Bay 1. You'll need a chest tube and 2 units O-neg. I'll have them here in 30 seconds. Dr. Cross, the head injury in Bay 4 is seizing. Load lorazepam now. Don't wait for labs. Patel, pull Sarah and Marcus to run supplies. I need them as runners, not bedside. Residents, if you're not actively doing a procedure, step back and let the nurses work." She turned to a wide-eyed nursing student standing near the crash cart. "What's your name?" Jenny." "Jenny, you're on vitals every 2 minutes. Call them out loud so we all hear. Don't stop until I tell you." The student nodded, hands still shaking but moving now. Hannah looked at Tennant. "You're coordinating with dispatch and surgery. Get us an OR and a trauma surgeon. We'll keep them alive until then." For a moment, Tennant just stared at her. Then his pride kicked in, and he opened his mouth to argue. "Dr. Tennant," Hayes' voice was sharp. "She's right. Do it." He hesitated, then turned and walked to the phone. Hannah moved through the ER like water. She didn't run, didn't shout, just appeared where she was needed. A kinked IV line, fixed. A failing airway, reintubated. A family blocking the hallway, redirected with calm, clear words. She carried equipment, called out vitals, held pressure on a femoral bleed while a resident got control of the artery. At one point, Cross looked up from a suture and saw her standing next to him with the exact instrument he was about to ask for. He took it without a word. The chaos didn't stop, but it slowed, focused, became manageable. 90 minutes later, the last patient rolled into surgery. The ER fell quiet, except for the hum of monitors and the distant sound of cleaning crews. Nurses sat on the floor, too tired to stand. Residents leaned against walls. Hayes pulled off her gloves and looked around at the damage. Blood on the floors, discarded supplies everywhere, exhausted staff. Then she looked at Hannah, who was quietly restocking a crash cart like nothing had happened. "Blake?" Hannah turned. "That was textbook mass casualty management. Where the hell did you learn that?" Hannah didn't answer right away. She closed the supply drawer and met Hayes' eyes. "Experience." Hayes studied her for a long moment. "What kind of experience?" Before Hannah could respond, the main doors slammed open. Not an ambulance. Not a patient. 4 people in military fatigues walked in. They weren't EMTs. They weren't National Guard on a training run. They moved with the kind of purpose that made everyone in the ER stand up a little straighter. The lead officer, a woman with silver captain's bars and a look that could cut glass, scanned the room until her eyes locked on Hannah. "Hannah Blake?" Hannah's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture, straighter, sharper. The relaxed efficiency she'd shown all night vanished, replaced by something harder. "Yes, ma'am." The captain walked forward. Behind her, the other soldiers fanned out, 2 flanking the entrance, 1 moving to the nurses' station. This wasn't casual. This was a deployment. Tennant stepped forward, trying to reclaim control. "Excuse me, this is a hospital. You can't just—" The captain didn't even look at him. "This is a federal matter. Step back." Tennant's mouth opened, closed. He stepped back. The captain stopped 3 feet from Hannah. "We need to talk, privately." Hannah glanced at Hayes, then back at the captain. "About what?" "About why you're here." The captain's voice dropped, just enough that only Hannah and the few closest people could hear. "And about the operation you were running before someone decided to make your life difficult." The room went dead silent. Every eye turned to Hannah. Sarah's face was pure confusion. Patel looked like she'd been slapped. Cross just stood there, frozen mid-step. Tennant's voice came out strangled. "Operation? What operation? She's a nurse." The captain finally looked at him. "Is she?" It wasn't a question. She turned back to Hannah and held out a tablet. "Roll up your sleeve." Hannah hesitated, just for a second. Then she pushed up the sleeve of her scrubs, exposing her left forearm. There, just below the elbow, was a tattoo. Small, precise. Black ink in a pattern that didn't look like decoration. It looked like code. Military code. The captain scanned it with the tablet. A soft beep. The screen lit up green. "Verified," the captain said quietly. "Lieutenant Blake, you're being recalled." The words landed like a grenade. "Lieutenant. Not nurse. Lieutenant." Tennant's face went white. "This is insane. She's been working here for months. There's no way she's—" 18 months, the captain interrupted, still looking at Hannah. 18 months embedded in civilian medical infrastructure as part of a joint task force monitoring hospital compliance with federal emergency preparedness standards. During that time, Lieutenant Blake filed 14 reports documenting safety violations, neglect, and obstruction of care. She finally turned to Tennant, and her smile was colder than January. You've been under investigation the entire time, Doctor, and you just failed. The ER erupted, voices overlapping, nurses stepping back from Tennant like he'd caught fire. Hayes staring at Hannah with something between shock and respect, Cross looking around like he'd woken up in the wrong reality. Tennant started shouting, "This is illegal! You can't spy on a hospital! I'll have your credentials pulled! You'll be silent," the captain said, and the room obeyed. She gestured to one of the soldiers who stepped forward with a document folder. "Dr. Marcus Tennant, you're hereby notified of a federal investigation into violations of emergency care standards, falsification of medical records, and obstruction of federally mandated safety protocols. You're suspended from all clinical duties effective immediately, pending a full review." Tennant grabbed for the folder. Missed. It hit the floor at his feet. Hannah stood in the center of the room, still calm, still quiet. But now everyone saw it. The way she held herself. The way she'd moved through the chaos earlier. Not like someone trying to survive it, but like someone who'd been trained for it. Command presence. Combat calm. She wasn't a nurse pretending to be strong. She was a soldier who'd been playing a role. The captain turned back to her. "We need your full report, Lieutenant, now." Hannah nodded. "Yes, ma'am." As she moved toward the exit, Patel found her voice. "Hannah, wait. You've been... this whole time, you were..." Hannah stopped, looked back. For the first time since the soldiers arrived, something soft crossed her face. Regret, maybe. Or just exhaustion. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you," she said quietly, "but the patients needed someone watching, someone who wouldn't look away." Then she was gone. The door swung shut behind her and the soldiers. The ER stood in stunned silence. Sarah finally whispered, "What the hell just happened?" Tennant stood in the center of the wreckage, his suspension notice on the floor, his career disintegrating in real time. His face was the color of old meat. Across the room, Cross slowly sank into a chair. "We've been reported. By her. The whole time." Hayes picked up the folder Tennant had dropped. Scanned the first page. Her eyebrows went up. Jesus, they have everything. Staffing violations, medication errors, falsified patient records. She looked up at Tennant. "You didn't just harass her. You handed her everything she needed to bury you." Tennant's mouth moved, but no sound came out. Outside, through the glass doors, Hannah Blake climbed into a military vehicle. The last thing anyone saw before it pulled away was her silhouette, straight-backed and still, disappearing into the night. And in the silence she left behind, one thought echoed through every mind in that ER. What else did we miss? The silence broke when Tennant kicked over a supply cart. Metal instruments clattered across the floor, scattering like shrapnel. A surgical tray spun on its edge before settling with a hollow ring. Nobody moved to pick anything up. They just watched him, this man who'd ruled the ER like a tyrant for 6 years, unravel in real time. "This is bullshit," he said, voice shaking. "Complete bullshit. You all heard her. She's been lying this whole time, spying, and you're just going to stand there?" Hayes folded the investigation notice and set it on the desk. "I'm going to call the hospital administrator. Then I'm going to secure every piece of documentation we have before someone decides to make it disappear." She looked at Tennant without blinking. "You should call your lawyer." "I didn't falsify anything." "Then you have nothing to worry about." Tennant lunged toward her. Cross grabbed his arm, more reflex than bravery. "Marcus, don't..." Tennant shook him off and stormed toward his office. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the frame. Through the glass window they could see him pacing, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing wildly at nothing. Sarah let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "I need to sit down." Patel was already sitting, staring at the empty doorway where Hannah had disappeared. 18 months. She was here 18 months and nobody knew. "I knew something was off," Cross muttered. He was still pale, still processing. "The way she moved during that MVC, that wasn't normal nursing. That was military." "You didn't know anything," Hayes said flatly. "None of us did. And that's the point." She walked to the nurses' station and pulled up the staff directory on the computer. Hannah Blake's profile was sparse. Date of hire, certifications, shift assignments. Nothing about prior service. No red flags. Hayes scrolled down to the emergency contact section. It was blank. She didn't list anyone, Hayes said quietly. No family, no friends, just a phone number that probably routes straight to wherever she just went. Outside, the October night had turned cold. Wind rattled the ER bay doors. A few nurses started cleaning up the chaos from the MVC, moving slow, like they were underwater. The adrenaline had burned off and left them hollow. Sarah picked up a discarded IV kit and stared at it. She saved my ass more times than I can count. I thought she was just good at her job. But she was, what, gathering evidence? Looks like it, Patel said. On all of us? On the hospital, on Tennant, maybe on Cross and Ramos too, I don't know. Patel rubbed her temples. But if they were monitoring compliance, that means someone reported us first. Someone flagged this place as dangerous. Hayes closed the laptop. Doesn't matter who. What matters is whether we're implicated. The words hung there, ugly and true. Everyone in that room started doing the same mental math. How many corners had they cut? How many times had they followed Tennant's orders, even when they knew better? How many incident reports had they filed, or failed to file, because it was easier to keep your head down? Sarah's hands started shaking. I followed his protocols, even when they didn't make sense. We all did, Patel said. That's how he got away with it. Across the room, a younger nurse named Kira finally spoke up. She'd been silent since the soldiers left, standing near the vending machines with her arms wrapped around herself. What happens to us now? Nobody answered, because nobody knew. By midnight, the hospital administration had locked down the ER. Not physically, patients still came through, nurses still worked, but informationally. All staff were ordered not to speak to media, not to discuss the investigation, not to leave the building until they'd been interviewed by a federal compliance officer. The officer arrived at 1 a.m., a sharp-eyed woman in a gray suit who sat up in the conference room and started calling people in one by one. Sarah went first. She came out 20 minutes later looking like she'd aged a decade. They asked about everything, she whispered to Patel in the hallway. Staffing levels, medication protocols, how many times Tennant overrode safety checks. They wanted names, dates, specifics. What did you tell them? The truth. Sarah's voice cracked. What else could I do? Patel went in next. Then Cross. Then Hayes. One by one, the staff filed through, and one by one, they came out quieter than they went in. Tennant refused to be interviewed. He'd barricaded himself in his office with his lawyer on speakerphone, shouting about due process and illegal surveillance. At 2 a.m., hospital security was called. Tennant came out with his jacket and his briefcase, face red, jaw clenched. He didn't look at anyone, just walked straight through the ER and out into the parking lot. Sarah watched him go. Think we'll ever see him again? Not if the investigation finds what I think it'll find, Hayes said. But the question nobody wanted to ask, the one that sat in the back of everyone's mind like a stone, was simpler. What did Hannah see? 3 days later, the first report leaked. Not officially. Someone on the compliance team sent a summary to a local journalist who'd been digging into hospital safety ratings. The journalist published it online at 6 a.m. on a Wednesday, and by noon, it had been picked up by every major outlet in the state. St. Aurora Medical Center, under federal investigation for safety violations. The article listed everything: understaffing that violated federal nurse-to-patient ratios, medication errors covered up to avoid malpractice suits, equipment failures ignored because fixing them cost money, patients discharged too early to free up beds. And at the center of it all, Dr. Marcus Tennant, whose protocols had been flagged by an embedded federal operative as systematically dangerous. The operative's name wasn't mentioned, but everyone who worked at St. Aurora knew exactly who it was. The hospital went into crisis mode. The CEO held a press conference, promising full cooperation and immediate reforms. Department heads scrambled to distance themselves from Tennant. Nurses who'd stayed quiet for years suddenly found their voices, filing complaints and incident reports that had been buried for months. And Hannah Blake became a ghost. Nobody knew where she was. Her apartment, a tiny one-bedroom near the hospital, had been cleared out. Her locker in the staff room was empty. Her phone number went to a generic voicemail. It was like she'd never existed. Sarah tried to find her. She called the military liaison number listed in the federal notice, got transferred 4 times, and finally reached a sergeant who told her politely but firmly that Lieutenant Blake's location and status were classified. "Can you at least tell her we're not angry?" Sarah asked. "Ma'am, I can pass along a message, but I can't confirm delivery." "Just tell her thank you. Tell her we get it now." The line went quiet for a moment. Then, "I'll make a note of that." The call ended. Sarah sat in her car in the hospital parking lot and cried for the first time in 15 years. The investigation moved fast. Federal auditors descended on St. Aurora like locusts, pulling records, interviewing staff, reviewing every patient case from the past 3 years. They found patterns: surgical complications that were never reported, patients who died under suspicious circumstances, equipment malfunctions that should have triggered recalls but didn't because Tennant had buried the paperwork. One case stood out. A 62-year-old man named Robert Callahan had come in 6 months ago with chest pain. Tennant had diagnosed anxiety, prescribed Xanax, and sent him home. Callahan died of a heart attack in his driveway 4 hours later. The autopsy showed a 90% blockage in his left anterior descending artery, something an EKG would have caught if Tennant had bothered to order one. Callahan's widow had filed a complaint. Tennant had dismissed it. The hospital legal team had settled quietly for an undisclosed sum and made her sign an NDA. Hannah had documented the whole thing, not just the medical failure, but the cover-up. The federal report included her notes, time-stamped and detailed, showing exactly how the hospital had prioritized money over patient safety. When the Callahan case hit the news, the public reaction was volcanic. Protests outside the hospital, calls for criminal charges. The CEO resigned. 3 board members followed. And still, nobody could find Hannah. 2 weeks after the soldiers took her, a package arrived at the ER nurses' station. No return address, just a plain manila envelope with staff of St. Aurora ER, written on the front in block letters. Patel opened it during a shift change. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth, but you deserve better than what you were given. You still do. Keep fighting for your patients. They need you." 8. Underneath, in smaller print, P.S. Sarah. "Your charting saved 2 lives during the MVC. Don't doubt yourself." Sarah read it 3 times, then pressed it to her chest and walked out of the room before anyone could see her lose it again. The note made its rounds. Nurses passed it between shifts. Some of them smiled. Some of them cried. A few just nodded, like they'd been waiting for permission to believe that what they did mattered. But one person didn't smile. Dr. Ian Cross stood in the hallway, staring at the note, his face unreadable. He'd been questioned twice by federal auditors. Both times they'd asked about his interactions with Hannah. Both times he'd insisted he barely knew her. That was a lie. Cross had worked alongside her during some of the worst shifts. He'd seen her save patients he would have given up on. He'd watched her stay calm when he lost his temper, and he'd reported her anyway because Tennant told him to, and because going along was easier than standing up. Now, reading her note, he felt something twist in his gut. Not guilt. Not yet. Just the faint, nauseating realization that he'd been on the wrong side. He crumpled the note and threw it in the trash, then stood there, staring at the bin, breathing hard. Hayes walked past and saw him. "You good?" "Fine." "You don't look fine." Cross turned on her. "What do you want me to say? That I screwed up? That I threw her under the bus because Tennant told me to? Fine. I did. Are you happy?" Hayes studied him for a long moment. "No, but at least you said it." She kept walking. Cross stayed in the hallway, alone, the crumpled note still visible through the trash bag's clear plastic. By the end of the month, the federal investigation had expanded beyond St. Aurora. 3 other hospitals in the network were flagged for similar violations. Tennant's medical license was suspended pending a criminal inquiry. Dr. Ramos, who'd filed the complaint against Hannah, was placed on administrative leave after auditors found he'd been altering patient records to hide his own mistakes. The dominoes kept falling. But the biggest Genhan came when the military released a partial declassification of Hannah's service record. Not the details, those stayed buried, but enough to paint a picture. Lieutenant Hannah Blake had served 2 tours overseas as a combat medic. She'd been attached to a forward surgical team in one of the deadliest operational zones on record. During her second tour, her unit had come under direct fire while treating casualties. She'd kept 3 soldiers alive through a 6-hour firefight, performing field amputations and blood transfusions with mortars landing close enough to shatter windows. She'd received a commendation for valor. Then she'd been quietly pulled from active duty and reassigned to a joint domestic task force monitoring civilian medical infrastructure, because someone high up had realized that the skills she'd used to keep soldiers alive under fire could also identify hospitals that were killing patients through negligence. The article that broke the story included a single photo: Hannah in dress uniform, standing at attention, eyes forward. She looked younger, harder, like someone who'd seen too much and decided the only way forward was straight through. When Sarah saw the photo, she texted Patel, "That's who we worked with, and we didn't even know." Patel's response came 2 minutes later. Maybe that was the point. Meanwhile, in a small military medical training facility 3 states away, Hannah sat in a debriefing room across from Captain Reyes, the same officer who'd pulled her from St. Aurora. "You look tired," Reyes said. "I am tired." "You did good work. 18 months undercover, 0 compromises, a full report that's going to save lives. The task force is calling it a textbook operation." Hannah leaned back in her chair. She hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night since the extraction. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the ER. Saw Sarah's face when the truth came out. Saw Cross crumbling under the weight of his own complicity. "Doesn't feel like a win," she said. "It wasn't supposed to feel like anything. It was supposed to be objective. People got hurt. People were already getting hurt. You stopped it." Hannah didn't respond. Reyes watched her for a moment, then slid a folder across the table. "New assignment. Another hospital. Smaller this time. Rural. We've had complaints about elder abuse in their long-term care wing. You'd go in as a floor nurse, same cover, same protocol." Hannah opened the folder, skimmed the briefing, closed it. "No." Reyes blinked. "No? I'm done. Blake, you're one of the best operatives we have. You can't just—" "I can." Hannah stood. "I spent 18 months watching good people break because one man decided his ego mattered more than patient safety. I documented it. I reported it. I did my job. But I also lied to people who trusted me, and I can't do that again. This is what you signed up for." "I signed up to save lives, not to live a double life while doing it." Reyes's jaw tightened. "If you walk away, you're done. No reinstatement, no pension. You'll be a civilian with a service record full of holes and no references you can actually use." Hannah met her eyes. "I know." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Reyes sighed and closed the folder. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe, but it's mine to make." Hannah walked to the door, then paused. "The people at St. Aurora, are they going to be okay? The hospital's under new management, federal oversight for the next 2 years. Most of the staff will keep their jobs if they cooperate with the reforms." "And Tennant?" "Criminal trial starts in 4 months. He's looking at negligent homicide, fraud, obstruction. If the prosecution gets half of what they want, he'll never practice medicine again." Hannah nodded slowly. "Good." She left the room and didn't look back. 3 weeks later, Sarah was working a night shift when a woman walked into the ER. Mid-30s, jeans and a jacket, a backpack slung over one shoulder. She looked tired but steady, familiar in a way Sarah couldn't immediately place. Then the woman pulled down her hood, and Sarah nearly dropped the chart she was holding. "Hannah?" Hannah smiled. It was small, tentative, like she wasn't sure it'd be welcome. "Hey, what are you doing here? I thought you were gone." "I was, but I'm back. Sort of." Sarah just stared at her. Around the nurses' station, heads were turning. Patel saw Hannah and froze. Kira whispered something to another nurse. Within seconds, the entire ER knew. Hannah raised her hand slightly, a gesture of peace. "I'm not here officially. I wanted to see how things were going and to apologize." "Apologize?" Sarah's voice cracked. "For what?" For lying. For letting you think I was someone I wasn't. You were exactly who you needed to be, Patel said, stepping forward. You saved this place. I reported it. The staff saved it. Don't do that, Sarah said fiercely. Don't downplay what you did. We were drowning, and we didn't even know it. You pulled us out. Hannah looked around the ER. It looked different now, cleaner, calmer. There were new protocols posted on the walls, a staffing chart that actually made sense, equipment that worked, small changes, but they added up to something bigger. You did this, she said quietly. Not me. We did it because you showed us we could. Before Hannah could respond, Hayes appeared from the back hallway. She stopped when she saw Hannah, and for a moment, the two women just looked at each other. Then Hayes walked over and extended her hand. Lieutenant. Hannah shook it. Just Hannah now. You resign? Something like that. Hayes nodded. We could use a good nurse, if you're looking. Hannah blinked. Are you offering me a job? I'm saying if you applied, I'd hire you. No lies this time, just the work. Hannah opened her mouth to respond. And then every monitor in the ER started screaming at once. Alarms blared. Nurses bolted toward the bays. A trauma call crackled over the radio. Inbound gunshot wound. ETA 2 minutes. Patient critical. Sarah grabbed a crash cart. Patel started barking orders. Hayes ran toward the trauma bay. The ER exploded into controlled chaos, the kind that came from a team that had learned to move as one. And Hannah stood there, watching them work, something stirring in her chest. That old pull. The reflex to move, to help, to step into the fire. She dropped her backpack and grabbed a pair of gloves from the supply cart. Sarah saw her and grinned. Thought you were done. I lied. They ran toward the trauma bay together. The ambulance was already backing in, lights flashing. Paramedics threw open the doors and a stretcher rushed past. A young man on it, shirt soaked red, eyes rolling back. GSW to the chest, massive hemorrhage, pressures dropping. Hayes caught the stretcher and started running alongside it. Bay 1, let's move. Hannah fell in beside her, hands already assessing. Entrance wound? Left anterior, third intercostal, exit wound posterior. He's losing blood fast. Chest tube ready? On it. They hit the bay at a dead run. The team moved like a machine. IV lines, oxygen, monitors. Hannah didn't think. She just moved. Hands finding the bleed, applying pressure, calling out vitals, staying 3 steps ahead of the chaos. The patient's pressure dropped, then stabilized, then dropped again. He's crashing, Hayes said. Not yet, he's not. Hannah's voice was calm, absolute. Cross-match 4 units, get surgery on the line, and someone find me a thoracotomy tray. We can't crack his chest here. We can if he dies otherwise. Move. The room obeyed. Gloves snapped. Instruments appeared. Hannah's hands moved with the kind of speed that came from doing this in places where hesitation meant death. The patient's heart stuttered, then caught, then beat. Hayes looked at her, eyes wide. How did you? Later, 10 minutes passed, then 20. The patient stabilized enough for transport. Surgery took him upstairs. The ER fell silent again, except for the sound of equipment being cleaned and nurses catching their breath. Hannah pulled off her gloves and leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. Sarah walked over, still breathing hard. That was incredible. That was luck. That was you. Hannah didn't argue. She was too tired. But as she looked around the ER, at the team that had just saved a life together, at the hospital that was slowly becoming what it should have been all along, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Purpose. Hayes approached, wiping her hands on a towel. So, about that job. Hannah laughed, short and tired. You serious? Dead serious. We need someone who won't fold under pressure, someone who knows how to fight for patients even when the system's against them. Hayes paused. Sound like anyone you know? Hannah looked at her, then at Sarah, who was grinning, then at Patel, who just nodded once, firm and certain. I'll think about it, Hannah said. Don't think too long. We've got another shift starting in 6 hours, and we're short-staffed. Hannah smiled despite herself. Some things never change. She grabbed her backpack and headed for the exit, but before she reached the doors, she stopped and looked back. The ER hummed with life. Patients waiting, Nurses moving, monitors beeping. It was messy and loud and exhausting and exactly where she belonged. She turned and walked back to the nurses' station. Actually, she said, I don't need to think about it. Hayes raised an eyebrow. Yeah? Yeah, when do I start? Before Hayes could answer, the main doors burst open. Not an ambulance. Not a patient. 2 federal agents in dark suits, badges out, faces grim. They walked straight toward Hannah. Hannah Blake? The ER went dead silent. Hannah's smile faded. She straightened, old instincts kicking in. Yes. The lead agent stopped 3 feet away. We need you to come with us. On what grounds? Classified, but it's not optional. Sarah stepped forward. Wait, you can't just... Ma'am, step back. Hayes moved between them. She doesn't work for you anymore. You have no authority here. The agent's expression didn't change. Actually, we do. Lieutenant Blake's resignation was never processed. Technically, she's still active duty military, which means she's still under orders. He looked at Hannah. And right now, those orders are to come with us. Hannah's face went pale. That's not possible. Reyes accepted my resignation. Captain Reyes was overruled by someone significantly higher up the chain. The agent held out a tablet. You've been reactivated, effective immediately. Hannah stared at the screen. Official orders. Classified routing codes. A deployment notice with her name on it. Her hand started shaking. What's the assignment? She asked quietly. The agent glanced around the ER, at the nurses watching, the patients waiting, the civilians who had no clearance for what he was about to say. We can't discuss that here. Then tell me this. Is it domestic or foreign? A pause. Both. Hannah's breath caught. That meant something big, something that required someone with her specific skill set, medical expertise, operational experience, and a willingness to do what most people couldn't. She looked at Sarah, at Patel, at Hayes, at the ER she'd just decided to call home again. How long? She asked. Unknown. Could be weeks, could be longer. Hannah closed her eyes, opened them, made her choice. Give me 5 minutes. The agent nodded. You've got 3. Hannah turned to Hayes. I'm sorry. Hayes's jaw was tight. Don't be. Just come back. I'll try. Sarah grabbed her arm. Hannah, what's happening? I don't know, but I have to go. That's not fair. I know. Hannah pulled her into a quick, fierce hug, then let go and walked toward the agents. They flanked her, professional and cold, and guided her toward the exit. At the doors, Hannah stopped and looked back one last time. The ER stood frozen, every eye on her, every face a mixture of confusion, worry, and something else. Respect, maybe. Or just the recognition that whatever was happening, it was bigger than any of them. Hannah raised her hand in a small wave, then turned and walked out into the night. The doors swung shut behind her. Inside, Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. What the hell just happened? Nobody answered, because outside, under the cold October sky, Hannah Blake climbed into an unmarked black vehicle. The agents got in beside her. The engine started, and as the car pulled away from St. Aurora Medical Center, the lead agent turned to her with an expression that was almost apologetic. We need you to disappear again, Lieutenant. But this time, it's not a hospital you're infiltrating. Hannah's stomach dropped. Then what is it? The agent handed her a classified briefing folder. Thick, heavy, marked with red-striped security tape. A war zone, he said, and you're the only medic they'll trust. Hannah opened the folder in the moving vehicle. The first page was a satellite image of a compound, concrete walls, guard towers, razor wire cutting geometric shadows across sand-colored ground. Red circles marked entry points. Blue dots indicated potential hostiles. At the bottom, a single line of text. Operation Nightfall. Medical extraction under hostile conditions. She looked up at the agent. Where is this? Can't tell you that until we're in the air. Then tell me why you need me specifically. The agent exchanged a glance with his partner, then pulled out a second file. Thinner. This one had a photo clipped to the front. A man in his 40s, gaunt, bearded, eyes hollow with exhaustion. Dr. Michael Garrett, immunologist. He was working with an international medical coalition in a conflict zone when his convoy was ambushed 3 weeks ago. He's being held in that compound. Hannah studied the photo. Hostage situation, so send a tactical team. We did. They got pinned down 2 clicks out. Lost 3 operators. Garrett's captors made it clear. Any further military action, and they execute him on camera. Then negotiate. We tried. They're not interested in money. They want a prisoner exchange we can't make. The agent tapped the folder. But they'll accept medical personnel. A gesture of goodwill, they call it. Someone to treat their wounded in exchange for access to Garrett. Hannah's stomach turned. You want to trade me for him? Not trade. Insert. You go in as a neutral party under a humanitarian flag. Treat their people. Gain access to Garrett. Assess his condition. And when the window opens, you extract him. That's not a medical mission. That's a covert op. It's both. The agent leaned forward. Garrett's been tortured. We have intel he's in critical condition. Internal bleeding, possible sepsis, broken ribs. Even if we get him out, he won't survive transport without immediate medical intervention. We need someone who can stabilize him under fire and move him through hostile territory. You've done that before. Hannah stared at the photo. At the man who is probably dying in some cell right now because geopolitics had decided his life was negotiable. What if I say no? The agent's face didn't change. Then Garrett dies, and we try again with someone less qualified. But you're the best we have. You know it, and so do we. Hannah closed the folder, looked out the window at the city lights blurring past. She'd walked away from the military because she was tired of lying, tired of living 2 lives. And here they were, pulling her right back in. How long do I have to decide? You don't. The plane leaves in 2 hours. The flight was 12 hours, most of it in silence. Hannah sat in the belly of a transport plane with 8 other people, 2 field operatives, a communications specialist, a translator, and 3 contractors whose job titles weren't listed. Nobody talked. They just prepped gear, checked weapons, and avoided eye contact. Hannah had been issued a tactical med kit, military-grade supplies, portable ultrasound, hemostatic agents, antibiotics that weren't available in most civilian hospitals. She inventoried everything twice, then sat with her back against the fuselage and tried not to think about what she was walking into. The translator, a woman named Amara, sat down across from her. First time? First time what? Hot zone extraction. Hannah shook her head. I've worked combat zones before. Not like this one. Amara's accent was hard to place, North African maybe, with British inflections. The group holding Garrett, they're not soldiers, they're opportunists. Former militia, current mercenaries, future war criminals if they live long enough. They don't follow rules. Then why would they accept a medic? Because even opportunists get shot, and their field hospitals are a joke. You show up, patch their people, they might let you see Garrett. Might. And if they don't? Amara smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Then you became a hostage too. Hannah looked at the other operatives. They were listening, but pretending not to. One of them, a compact man with scars on his knuckles, finally spoke up. She's not wrong. These guys are unpredictable. But they're also desperate. They need medical expertise more than they need another bargaining chip. Play it right, and you walk in and out untouched. And if I play it wrong? Then we come get you, loudly. Hannah didn't find that comforting. The plane hit turbulence and everyone grabbed for handhelds. The cargo rattled. Someone cursed. Hannah closed her eyes and tried to remember why she'd agreed to this. Because Garrett was someone's colleague, someone's friend, maybe someone's father. And because if she didn't go, they'd send someone less capable, and that person would fail, and Garrett would die screaming in a cell. So she'd said yes, like she always did. They landed at a forward operating base just after dawn. The base was barely more than a cluster of prefab buildings and sandbag barriers surrounded by dust and heat that hit like a physical wall the moment the cargo ramp dropped. Hannah stepped off the plane into a world that smelled like diesel and sand and something metallic she didn't want to identify. A man in fatigues met them on the tarmac. Major Ellis, according to the name tape on his chest. He looked like he'd been awake for 3 days straight. Lieutenant Blake? Just Blake. Fair enough. Walk with me. He led her across the base to a low concrete building that served as a command center. Inside, it was cooler, but not by much. Maps covered the walls, marked with grease pencil and digital overlays. A radio squawked in the corner. Two analysts sat at laptops tracking something Hannah couldn't see. Ellis pointed to a map of the region. This is where we are. This, he tapped a red circle 40 kilometers east, is where Garrett is. The compound's controlled by a group calling themselves the Scorpion Militia, formerly aligned with regional forces, now independent and very well armed. They've got about 60 fighters, give or take, and they fortified the hell out of that location. Hannah studied the map. What's their endgame? Leverage. They grabbed Garrett because he's valuable. They're holding him until someone pays up or trades for him. Problem is, we can't do either without setting a precedent. So you're sending me in to do it quietly? Exactly. Ellis pulled up a photo on his tablet, a convoy of trucks approaching a gate. This is their weekly supply run. They've agreed to let you join the next one, which leaves in 8 hours. You'll enter as part of a medical delegation from an NGO. Once inside, you'll be taken to their field hospital. Treat their wounded, build trust, then request access to Garrett on humanitarian grounds. And if they refuse, then you observe, document his condition, and report back. At minimum, we need proof of life. Hannah felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders. This wasn't a rescue. This was a reconnaissance mission disguised as mercy work, and if it went sideways, she'd be on her own. What's my extraction plan? Ellis hesitated. We're working on that. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. If things go clean, you ride back out with the convoy. If they don't, we've got assets positioned to move in, but it'll be messy. Hannah looked at him. You mean you'll flatten the compound and hope I'm not in the blast radius? I mean, we'll do everything we can to get you out alive, but yeah, it might get messy. She turned back to the map, stared at that red circle. 40 kilometers away, a man was dying because he'd tried to help people. And now she was about to walk into the same trap, armed with nothing but a medkit and a prayer that these people valued medical care more than leverage. Who's going in with me? She asked. No one. They only agreed to one medic. You'll have a local translator, guy named Rashid. He's worked with us before. But otherwise, you're solo. Great. Ellis's expression softened just slightly. Look, I know this is a bad deal, but Garrett's got maybe a week left, tops. You're his best shot. Hannah nodded, didn't trust herself to speak. Get some rest, Ellis said. We move at 1400 hours. She didn't rest. She spent the next 6 hours going through her med kit, memorizing supply locations, running through trauma protocols in her head. At some point, Amara brought her food, something that might have been chicken, might have been something else. Hannah ate it without tasting. At 13:30, she changed into civilian clothes, loose pants, a long-sleeved shirt, a headscarf that Amara helped her wrap. No insignia, no identification, just a woman with a medical bag. Rashid met her at this convoy staging area. He was younger than she expected, maybe mid-20s, with nervous eyes and a smile that didn't fit the situation. You're the medic? Hannah. Rashid. I'll be translating. He glanced at the trucks being loaded. You ever done anything like this before? Define this. Walk into a hostile camp and hope they don't shoot you. Hannah thought about the firefight in Kandahar, the ambush outside Fallujah, the night she'd spent in a blown-out building with 3 casualties and no backup. Yeah, I've done something like this. Rashid nodded slowly. Good, because these guys, they're not predictable. So I've heard. They climbed into the back of a supply truck along with 2 actual NGO workers, a doctor named Layla and a nurse named Idris, both locals who'd been doing this run for months. Layla gave Hannah a long look. You're military. Used to be. They know that? Not unless you tell them. Layla didn't smile. Don't give them a reason to ask. The convoy rolled out at 1400 sharp. 3 trucks, 2 armed escorts, and a route that took them through terrain Hannah could only describe as apocalyptic. Bombed-out villages, burned fields, checkpoints manned by teenagers with AKs who looked at the convoy like they were deciding whether to wave it through or open fire. 2 hours in, they hit the first real checkpoint. Scorpion Militia. 6 fighters, faces wrapped, weapons up. The lead truck stopped. Words were exchanged. Hannah couldn't hear them, but she saw Rashid tense. What's wrong? She whispered. They're searching the trucks. That normal? No. The fighters approached. One of them climbed into the back of Hannah's truck and started pulling open supply crates. He found bandages, antibiotics, IV fluids, standard stuff. Then he turned to Hannah and said something in Arabic. Rashid translated. He wants to know who you are. Tell him I'm a medic, Rashid spoke. The fighter responded, sharper this time. He says they weren't told about you. Hannah's pulse kicked up, but she kept her face neutral. Tell him your people requested additional medical personnel. I'm here to help. Rashid translated. The fighter stared at her, then he reached out and grabbed her med kit. Hey. He opened it, rifled through, pulled out a surgical kit and examined it like he was looking for something specific. Then he tossed it back at her and barked an order. What'd he say? Hannah asked. He says if you're lying, they'll know. The fighter jumped out, waved the convoy through. The trucks rolled forward, and Hannah let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Layla leaned over. Welcome to the Scorpion Militia, where trust is optional and paranoia is policy. The compound was worse than the satellite images suggested. The walls were pockmarked with bullet holes. Guard towers bristled with weapons. Inside, the courtyard was a mess of parked vehicles, stacked ammunition crates, and men who looked at the arriving convoy like sharks watching chum hit the water. Hannah climbed out of the truck and immediately felt every eye on her. She kept her head down, her bag close, and followed Layla toward a low building on the east side of the compound. The field hospital was a nightmare. Rows of cots, most of them occupied. The air stank of infection and unwashed bodies. A single overhead bulb flickered. Medical supplies were piled in corners, disorganized and filthy. And in the center of it all, a man in a blood-stained coat was attempting to suture a leg wound with thread that looked like it came from a sewing kit. Layla saw Hannah's expression and sighed. I know, but it's what we have. This is criminal. This is war. Hannah set down her bag and got to work. She started with the worst cases, compound fractures, infected wounds, a teenage fighter with a bullet still lodged in his shoulder. She didn't ask questions, didn't judge, just treated them like they were any other patient, because that's what they were. Broken people who'd been fed into a meat grinder and spat out the other side. 2 hours in, a man in his 50s walked in. He wore cleaner clothes than the others, carried himself with authority. He watched Hannah work for a full minute before speaking. Rashid appeared at her elbow. He wants to know if you're really a doctor. Hannah didn't look up. She was debriding a wound, and it required focus. Tell him I'm a nurse, trained in field trauma, Rashid translated. The man responded. He says you work fast. Tell him I've had practice. The man laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. He said something else, longer this time. He says his men are impressed. They thought you'd be useless. He's glad they were wrong. Hannah finished the debridement and bandaged the wound. Then she looked up at the man. Tell him I'm here to help, but I have a request. Rashid hesitated. Hannah, don't. Tell him. Rashid translated. The man's expression shifted. Curiosity, maybe suspicion. I've heard you're holding an American doctor. Michael Garrett. I'd like to see him. Assess his condition. If he's injured, I can treat him. Rashid spoke. The man listened. Then his face went cold. He said one word. No. Why not? Rashid translated the response. He says Garrett is not your concern. You're here for his men, nothing else. If he's in critical condition, he could die. You don't want that on your hands. The man stepped closer. When he spoke, his voice was low and dangerous. Rashid translated haltingly. He says, if Garrett dies, it's because your government refused to meet their terms. His blood is on their hands, not his. Hannah met his eyes, didn't flinch. Let me see him, just once. 5 minutes. If he's dying, you lose your leverage. If I stabilize him, you keep your bargaining chip. It's in your interest. The man studied her. Then he turned and walked out without another word. Rashid grabbed her arm. Are you insane? You don't make demands here. I didn't demand. I offered a solution. To them, it's the same thing. Hannah pulled her arm free and went back to work. She didn't know if her gamble had worked, but she'd planted the seed. Now she had to wait. 3 hours later, as she was finishing with the last patient, the man returned. He said something to Rashid, then walked out again. Rashid turned to Hannah, face pale. He says you can see Garrett, but only for 5 minutes, and only because you've proven useful. Hannah's heart slammed against her ribs. When? Now. They took her across the courtyard to a smaller building, concrete, windowless, a single door with 2 guards. The man who'd granted her access stood waiting. He gestured for her to follow. Inside, the building was dark and smelled like rot. A narrow hallway led to a row of cells. The man stopped at the 3rd one and unlocked it. 5 minutes, Rashid translated. And don't try anything stupid. The door swung open. Hannah stepped inside. The cell was barely 6 feet by 8. No windows. A single cot. And on that cot, a man who looked more dead than alive. Michael Garrett. Hannah dropped to her knees beside him. His face was bruised, one eye swollen shut. His breathing was shallow and wet, possible pneumothorax. She pressed gently on his ribs and he groaned, definitely broken. Maybe multiple fractures. His skin was hot to the touch. Fever, infection. Dr. Garrett, she said softly. Can you hear me? His good eye cracked open, focused on her with effort. Who? My name's Hannah. I'm here to help. American? Yes. He tried to sit up, failed, coughed, and blood flecked his lips. Hannah's stomach dropped. Internal bleeding, advanced. How long have you been coughing blood? 2 days, maybe 3. Hard to tell. She pulled out a penlight and checked his pupils. Reactive, but sluggish. She palpated his abdomen, rigid, distended. Possible splenic rupture or liver laceration. They hit you in the stomach? Ribs, fists, boots, take your pick. Hannah worked fast, documenting everything she could in the time she had. Broken ribs, internal hemorrhaging, sepsis setting in, severe dehydration. Without surgery, he had days at most. Maybe less. I'm going to get you out of here, she said. Garrett's laugh turned into a cough. Don't make promises you can't keep. I mean it. They'll kill you if you try. They'll kill you if I don't. The door opened. The man barked something. Rashid appeared. Time's up. Hannah stood. He needs surgery, now. Internal bleeding, possible organ damage. Without intervention, he won't last the week. Rashid translated. The man responded, indifferent. He says that's not his problem. It will be when Garrett dies and you lose your leverage. The man said something sharp. Rashid winced. What? Hannah demanded. He says, if you're so concerned, you can stay and treat him yourself, as their guest. Hannah's blood went cold. I'm not a hostage. Then leave, now, and don't come back. Hannah looked at Garrett, at the man who was dying on a cot in a cell because he'd tried to save lives. She thought about walking away, getting back on that convoy, reporting to Ellis that Garrett was beyond saving. Then she thought about every patient she'd lost because she hadn't been there, every soldier who'd bled out while she was somewhere else, every promise she'd made to herself that she'd never turn her back on someone who needed her. She set down her medkit. I'll stay. Rashid stared at her. Hannah, you can't. Tell him I'll stay. Treat Garrett, stabilize him, but I need supplies. Surgical equipment, antibiotics, and I need them now. Rashid translated, voice shaking. The man listened. Then he smiled, cold and calculating. He said something. Rashid translated. He agrees you stay, treat the American. But if he dies, so do you. Hannah's hands clenched, but her voice stayed steady. Then I'd better not let him die. The man walked out. The guard stayed. The door slammed shut. And Hannah Blake, for the second time in a month, found herself trapped in a situation where the only way out was through. Rashid looked at her like she'd lost her mind. They're going to kill you both. Not if I can help it. And if you can't? Hannah knelt beside Garrett and started pulling supplies from her kit. Then at least I tried. Outside the cell, she heard the convoy engines starting, Layla calling her name, the trucks rolling out, leaving her behind. She was alone now, surrounded by armed men who saw her as a tool at best and a target at worst. No extraction plan, no backup. Just her, a dying man, and a dwindling supply of medical equipment. Garrett opened his eye and looked at her. You're insane. Yeah, Hannah said quietly. I get that a lot. She started an IV line, hands steady despite the adrenaline screaming through her veins. Outside she heard shouting, orders being barked, the compound gearing up for something. Then an explosion. Not close, but close enough to shake dust from the ceiling. The guards at the door tensed. Radios crackled. Someone screamed. Hannah looked at Garrett. Was that? Another explosion, closer this time. The lights flickered, went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. The guards bolted from the door, shouting. Hannah heard gunfire, screaming, chaos erupting across the compound. Garrett grabbed her wrist. What's happening? Hannah's mind raced. This wasn't random. Someone had just attacked the compound. Either the military had decided to move in despite the risks, or another faction had chosen the worst possible time to start a fight. Either way, she and Garrett were caught in the middle. She grabbed her med kit. Can you walk? Barely. Then we're about to find out how badly you want to live. She hauled him to his feet. He gasped, nearly collapsed. She caught him, took his weight, and moved toward the door. Outside, the compound was a war zone. Tracers cut through the darkness. Buildings burned. Men ran in every direction, some toward the fight, some away from it. And in the chaos, Hannah saw her chance. Come on, she hissed. They stumbled into the courtyard. A fighter ran past, didn't even see them. Hannah dragged Garrett toward the east wall, where the vehicles were parked. If she could get to a truck. A bullet whined past her head. She dropped, pulling Garrett down with her. He screamed. Sorry, she gasped. Don't be. Just move. They crawled. Another explosion lit up the night. Hannah saw the gate. It was open, fighters pouring through to meet whoever was attacking. She pulled Garrett to his feet and ran. They made it 10 yards before someone shouted. Hannah didn't look back. She just ran faster, half carrying Garrett, her medkit banging against her hip. A truck loomed ahead. Hannah threw Garrett into the passenger seat, climbed in, and found the keys still in the ignition. You've got to be kidding me, she muttered. She turned the key. The engine roared to life. Gunfire erupted behind them. The windshield spiderwebbed. Hannah didn't think. She floored it. The truck lurched forward, tires screaming. She aimed for the gate, for the open desert beyond, for anything that wasn't this compound. A fighter stepped into her path, weapon raised. Hannah didn't slow down. The truck hit him, and he went flying. Garrett was shouting something she couldn't hear over the engine and the gunfire and the blood pounding in her ears. They blasted through the gate. The desert opened up in front of them, dark and endless, and somehow safer than what they were leaving behind. Hannah drove. Didn't know where she was going. Didn't care. Just drove. Behind them, the compound burned. And somewhere in that chaos, someone would realize she and Garrett were gone, which meant they'd be coming. Hannah glanced at Garrett. He was slumped against the door, breathing hard, blood soaking through his shirt. Stay with me, she said. He nodded weakly. She looked at the road ahead. No lights, no markers, just sand and darkness, and the very real possibility that she'd just driven them both into a kill zone with no way out. Her radio crackled. A voice cut through the static. Ellis. Blake, if you can hear this, we've got eyes on your position. Stay on your current heading. Extraction team inbound. ETA, 12 minutes. Hannah grabbed the radio. 12 minutes might be too long. Garrett's critical. I need a med evac now. Working on it. Just keep moving. The radio went dead. Hannah pressed harder on the gas. The truck shook. The engine whined. And in the rearview mirror, she saw headlights. Multiple vehicles. Closing fast. They were being chased. Hannah cut the headlights and veered off the road. The truck bucked over rocks and sand, suspension screaming, but she didn't let up. In the mirror, the pursuing vehicles split. Two stayed on the road, one followed her into the desert. They're still coming, Garrett rasped. I know. She yanked the wheel hard left, threading between two dunes. The truck behind them tried to match the turn and nearly rolled. It recovered, but fell back 50 yards. Hannah used the gap to push deeper into the darkness, where the terrain got rougher and the visibility dropped to nothing. The radio crackled again. Blake, you're off course. We need you back on the main route for extraction. Hannah grabbed it. Main route's compromised. I've got hostiles on my tail and a patient who's bleeding out. You want us? You come to us. Blake? I'm sending coordinates. Be there or don't. Out. She threw the radio onto the dash and focused on driving. Garrett was slumped against the door, barely conscious. His breathing had gone shallow, rattling in his chest like loose gravel. She didn't need a stethoscope to know his lung was collapsing. Stay awake, she said sharply. He didn't respond. She reached over and slapped his shoulder, hard. Garrett, eyes open. He jolted. What? Talk to me. Anything. Just stay awake. Can't. Too tired. You don't get to be tired. Not yet. She navigated around a rocky outcrop, the truck tilting dangerously. Tell me about your work, the immunology stuff. Why? Because I need you conscious, and you need a reason to stay that way. So talk. Garrett's good eye focused on her. He coughed, winced, then started speaking in a voice that barely carried over the engine. Was working on vaccine distribution, remote areas, places nobody else would go. Sounds noble. Sounds stupid. Got myself kidnapped. You were trying to help people. A lot of good it did. Hannah swerved around another dune. The headlights behind them were still there, but farther back now. You're not dead yet. That counts for something. We're being chased by people who want to kill us. I'd call that a draw. Despite everything, Hannah almost smiled. You've got a sense of humor. That's good. Means you're not in shock yet. Pretty sure I am in shock. Then you're a functional version of it. The truck hit a washout and went airborne for a second. They landed hard. Something under the hood made a sound like a gunshot. The engine coughed but kept running. That didn't sound good, Garrett said. Nothing about this is good. We're making it work anyway. She checked the mirror. The pursuing vehicle had closed the gap again. Worse, she could see muzzle flashes. They were shooting. Bullets stitched across the sand to her left. One hit the side mirror and obliterated it. Hannah jerked the wheel right, putting a dune between them and the shooter. How far to extraction? Garrett asked. Hannah glanced at the GPS on the dash. 4 kilometers. Maybe 5. How long? At this speed? 8 minutes. If we don't get shot first? Great odds. Better than staying in that cell. Another burst of gunfire. This time, one hit the rear panel with a metallic clang. The truck lurched, but didn't slow. Hannah pushed harder, coaxing every bit of speed the engine could give. Then the radio crackled. Different voice. Calm. Military. Vehicle fleeing southeast from the compound. This is Falcon 2. We have visual. Confirm you are Lieutenant Blake. Hannah grabbed the radio. Confirmed. I've got Garrett. He's critical. Where are you? 3 clicks north of your position. Turn 15 degrees left and maintain speed. We'll intercept. Hannah checked the compass and adjusted. What about the hostiles? Leave them to us. 10 seconds later, she heard it, a low roar that built into a scream. Then the night lit up. A helicopter gunship dropped out of the darkness like a bird of prey, rotors churning the air into a sandstorm. Spotlights blazed, pinning the pursuing truck in a cone of white light. A voice boomed over a loudspeaker, first in English, then Arabic. Stop your vehicle. Drop your weapons. This is your only warning. The truck behind them didn't stop. It accelerated, trying to evade. The gunship's minigun opened up, a sound like the sky tearing in half. Tracers poured into the sand around the truck, then into the truck itself. The vehicle swerved, flipped, tumbled end over end, and came to rest on its side in a cloud of dust and smoke. Hannah didn't slow down. She just kept driving toward the coordinates Falcon 2 had given her. 2 minutes later, she saw them. 3 Humvees in a defensive formation, lights off, weapons trained outward. She pulled up and killed the engine. Soldiers surrounded the truck immediately, weapons up, voices sharp. Hands where we can see them. Hannah raised her hands. I'm Lieutenant Blake. The man in the passenger seat is Dr. Michael Garrett. He needs a medevac now. A medic pushed through and yanked open Garrett's door. He took one look and started barking orders. Pneumothorax, possible internal bleed, BP's in the basement. Get him on a stretcher, start 2 large-bore IVs, and call for the bird. They pulled Garrett out with efficiency that would have made Hannah proud if she wasn't so exhausted. She climbed out of the truck, legs shaking, and nearly collapsed. A soldier caught her. Easy. When's the last time you ate? I don't know. Yesterday? Sit down before you fall down. Hannah sat on the Humvee's bumper and watched them work on Garrett. They had him on a stretcher in 30 seconds, IV lines in 45, airway secured in 60. The helicopter that had taken out their pursuers landed nearby, rotors still spinning, and they loaded Garrett into the back. A flight medic leaned out. You coming? Hannah looked at the soldier who'd caught her. Am I? You're supposed to debrief first, but given the circumstances, I think they'll make an exception. Get on the bird. She climbed in. The helicopter lifted off before she'd even buckled in. Through the open door, she watched the desert fall away. The burning compound in the distance, the wreckage of the truck that had chased them, the FOB growing closer with every second. Garrett was being worked on by 2 medics. They'd intubated him, hung blood, and were running an ultrasound to confirm the internal bleeding. Hannah wanted to help, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking, so she just sat there, strapped in, useless. One of the medics glanced at her. "You the one who kept him alive in that cell?" "Barely." "Barely's better than not at all." The helicopter hit turbulence. Hannah's stomach lurched. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about how many things could have gone wrong in the last 3 hours. How many times she should have died but didn't. How many decisions she'd made on instinct that could have gotten them both killed. When they landed at the FOB, a full surgical team was waiting. They pulled Garrett out and rushed him toward the medical building. Hannah tried to follow, but someone grabbed her arm. Major Ellis. "Blake, you need to be checked out." "I'm fine." "You're covered in blood." She looked down. He was right. Her clothes were soaked. Some of it was Garrett's. Some of it might have been hers. She couldn't tell anymore. "Come on," Ellis said, his voice gentler now. "Let them do their job. You've done yours." The FOB medical clinic was small but functional. A doctor, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes, examined Hannah in silence, checked her vitals, looked for injuries, found bruises, dehydration, exhaustion, but nothing life-threatening. "You're lucky," the doctor said. "Doesn't feel like it." "Trust me, I've seen people come back from situations like that in body bags. You walked out. That's luck." She handed Hannah a bottle of water and some electrolyte tablets. "Drink all of this, then get some sleep. We'll talk in the morning." Hannah drank. The water tasted like metal, but she finished it anyway. Then she sat on the exam table, staring at the wall, trying to process everything that had just happened. Ellis came in 20 minutes later. "Garrett's in surgery. They're repairing a lacerated spleen and reinflating his lung. Doc says he'll make it." Hannah felt something unclench in her chest. "Good." "Good?" Ellis raised an eyebrow. "You just pulled off an unauthorized extraction from a hostile compound, stole a vehicle, and got chased through the desert by armed militants. Good doesn't quite cover it. What do you want me to say?" "I want you to explain how you went from observe and report to full tactical exfil in under 6 hours." Hannah met his eyes. "He was dying. I had a window. I took it." "You took a massive risk." "I've taken worse." Ellis studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled up a chair and sat down. "Off the record?" "Sure." "That was one of the gutsiest things I've seen in 15 years of service. Also one of the stupidest. If that compound hadn't been hit by a rival faction at exactly the right time, you'd both be dead." "But we're not." "No, you're not." He leaned back. "The brass is going to want a full debrief. They're going to ask why you stayed when you could have left, why you risked your life for someone you didn't know." Hannah didn't answer right away. She thought about Garrett lying in that cell, about all the patients she'd lost because she wasn't there, about the promises she'd made to herself that she'd never walk away from someone who needed her. "Because it was the right thing to do," she said finally. Ellis nodded slowly. "I figured you'd say that." He stood and headed for the door. Then he paused. "For what it's worth, Blake, you made the right call. Not the safe one, but the right one." He left. Hannah sat alone in the exam room, staring at her hands. They'd stopped shaking. That was something. She didn't sleep. She tried, but every time she closed her eyes, she was back in that compound. Heard the explosions, felt the truck bucking under her, saw Garrett's face, pale and blood-streaked, as she dragged him toward freedom. At 0400, she gave up and went to check on him. The surgical ward was quiet, except for the beep of monitors. Garrett was in the ICU, intubated and sedated, but stable. The surgeon, a lieutenant colonel with gray at his temples, saw her and walked over. "You're Blake." "Yeah." "You did good work keeping him alive. Another 12 hours and we wouldn't have been able to save him." "He gonna make it?" "Barring complications, yes. We repaired the spleen, drained the hemothorax, stabilized the fractures. He'll need weeks of recovery, but he'll live." Hannah felt the weight she'd been carrying since that cell finally lift. "Thank you." Don't thank me. You're the one who got him here. The surgeon tilted his head. You know, I've been doing this for 23 years. I've seen a lot of medics. Most of them crack under pressure. You didn't. I've had practice. So I've heard. He handed her a tablet. Your debrief's scheduled for 0800. Major Ellis wants a full report, and there's someone else who wants to talk to you. Hannah looked at the screen. The name made her stomach drop. Captain Reyes. The debrief was held in a secure room with no windows and too many people. Ellis was there. So was a colonel Hannah didn't recognize, a JAG officer, an intelligence analyst, and sitting at the head of the table, Captain Reyes. She looked the same as she had 3 weeks ago, sharp, controlled, unreadable. When Hannah entered, Reyes didn't stand. She just gestured to a chair. Sit. Hannah sat. Reyes pulled up a file on her tablet. Let's start with the basics. You were inserted into the Scorpion militia compound under the cover of a medical delegation. Your mission was to observe, assess Dr. Garrett's condition, and report back. Instead, you chose to stay, treat him, and then execute an unauthorized extraction during an active firefight. Is that accurate? Yes. Why? Because he was dying. That wasn't the mission. The mission was to get him out. I did that. Reyes leaned forward. The mission was to gather intelligence so we could plan a proper extraction. What you did was reckless, endangered yourself and Dr. Garrett, and could have sparked a diplomatic incident if things had gone differently. Hannah's jaw tightened. If I'd waited for a proper extraction, Garrett would be dead. You don't know that. I'm a medic. Yes, I do. The room went quiet. The colonel cleared his throat. Lieutenant Blake, I think what Captain Reyes is trying to say. I know what she's trying to say, Hannah interrupted. She looked at Reyes. You wanted me to follow protocol. Play it safe. Let someone else make the call. But I've been doing this long enough to know that sometimes protocol gets people killed. So I made a judgment call. And it worked. Reyes's expression didn't change. And if it hadn't worked? If you'd both been killed? Then at least I tried. Which is more than I can say for sitting in a cell documenting how someone died. The JAG officer shifted uncomfortably. Ellis looked like he was trying not to smile. The colonel folded his hands on the table. Lieutenant Blake, he said carefully, no one here is questioning your courage, but there are rules for a reason. Chain of command, operational security. If every soldier made judgment calls in the field, we'd have chaos. With respect, sir, we already had chaos. I just navigated it better than the people shooting at me. The colonel blinked. Reyes's mouth thinned into a line. That's enough, Reyes said. Blake, step outside. We need to discuss this. Hannah stood and walked out. The door closed behind her with a heavy click. She leaned against the wall and waited. 20 minutes later, the door opened. Ellis came out first. Well, Hannah asked, you're not being court-martialed if that's what you're worried about. What am I being? Reprimanded. Formally. Off the record, the colonel thinks you're a hero. On the record, you disobeyed orders and endangered an operation. Hannah let out a breath. So I'm grounded. Temporarily, pending a full review of the mission. But Blake? Ellis lowered his voice. Between you and me, you did the right thing. Don't let them make you doubt that. He walked away. Hannah stood there staring at the closed door, wondering if she'd just ended her career. Then Reyes stepped out. Walk with me, she said. They walked in silence through the FOB, past rows of tents and supply depots, until they reached the perimeter fence. Beyond it, the desert stretched out in every direction, endless and indifferent. Reyes stopped and looked out at the horizon. You've always been a problem, Blake. I've heard. You don't follow orders unless they make sense to you. You question authority. You make decisions based on what you think is right instead of what you're told to do. Sounds about right. Reyes turned to face her. In most units, that would get you discharged. But in this task force, it's exactly why we recruited you. Hannah blinked. What? We needed someone who wouldn't just follow protocol. Someone who'd make the hard calls when the situation demanded it. Someone who'd prioritize the mission over the rules. Reyes paused. You did that. And you brought Garrett home alive. So why the reprimand? Because if I don't discipline you, it sets a precedent. Every operator in the field will think they can go rogue whenever they feel like it. But between you and me? Reyes's expression softened just slightly. I would have done the same thing. Hannah didn't know what to say. Reyes handed her a folder. This is your next assignment, if you want it. Hannah opened the folder. Inside was a dossier on a hospital in Eastern Europe. Civilian facility. Reports of human trafficking, organ smuggling, patients disappearing without records. You want me to go undercover again? I want you to do what you do best. Get inside, find out what's happening, stop it. Hannah closed the folder. And if I say no, then you're done. Honorable discharge, full benefits. You walk away clean. No strings? No strings. Hannah looked at the folder, then at the desert, then at Reyes. I need time to think. You've got 48 hours, then I need an answer. Reyes walked away, leaving Hannah alone at the fence with the folder in her hands and a choice she wasn't sure she wanted to make. She spent the next day with Garrett. He woke up around noon, groggy and disoriented, but alive. When he saw her sitting beside his bed, he managed a weak smile. You're real. Thought I dreamed you. You didn't. We made it out. We did. He closed his eyes. Thank you. Hannah didn't know how to respond to that, so she just nodded. Later, when he was more alert, he asked her what happened after the escape. She gave him the short version, the chase, the gunship, the surgery. He listened without interrupting. You could have left me, he said when she finished. I could have. I didn't. Why? Hannah thought about all the answers she could give. The tactical reasons, the moral ones, the personal ones. But in the end, she just told him the truth. Because no one deserves to die alone in a cell. Garrett's eyes glistened. He looked away. I owe you my life. You don't owe me anything. Just go back to your work. Help people. That's enough. He nodded. Then he looked at her again. What about you? What's next? Hannah glanced at the folder she'd left on the chair. I don't know yet. On the second day, she got a call from St. Aurora. It was Sarah. Hannah, oh my God, are you okay? We heard you were deployed somewhere dangerous and then nothing for weeks. I'm fine. What's going on? Sarah's voice shifted. You need to see this. Can you get to a computer? Hannah found a terminal in the command center and pulled up the link Sarah sent. It was a news article. Former St. Aurora doctor arrested on federal charges. The photo showed Marcus Tennant in handcuffs, being led out of a courthouse. The article detailed everything: the falsified records, the covered-up deaths, the systematic negligence that had endangered hundreds of patients. The federal investigation had concluded. Tennant was facing 23 counts, including criminally negligent homicide. Hannah scrolled down. There were quotes from patients' families, from hospital staff, from Sarah, who testified about the culture of fear Tennant had created. And at the bottom, a statement from the hospital's new CEO. We failed our patients. We failed our staff. But thanks to the courage of one individual who refused to stay silent, we now have the chance to rebuild with integrity and accountability. We owe them everything. Sarah's voice came through the phone. They're talking about you, Hannah. Everyone knows it was you. Hannah stared at the screen. I didn't do it for recognition. I know, but you deserve it anyway. The hospital's changed, new leadership, new protocols. People actually feel safe coming to work now. That's because of you. Hannah felt something catch in her throat. How's everyone else? Patel's in charge of the ER now. I got promoted to senior nurse. Cross, he resigned. Couldn't handle the guilt, I think. But the rest of us, we're making it work. It's better now. Really. Good. When are you coming back? Hannah looked at the folder on the desk, at the assignment waiting for her, at the choice she still hadn't made. I don't know, she said honestly. Soon. Maybe. After the call ended, Hannah sat in the quiet of the command center and thought about everything that had happened. She'd gone into St. Aurora to document violations and ended up exposing a system that had been killing people for years. She'd been sent to observe Garrett and ended up saving his life. Every time someone told her to stay in her lane, she'd stepped outside it, and people had lived because of it. But she was tired. Tired of lying, tired of living in the shadows, tired of being the person who cleaned up everyone else's messes while pretending to be someone else. She picked up the folder and walked to Reyes's office. The captain was at her desk, reviewing reports. "I have an answer," Hannah said. Reyes looked up. "And?" Hannah set the folder on the desk. "I'm done." Reyes didn't look surprised. "You sure? I've been doing this for years. Embedded operations, undercover work, living two lives at once. I'm good at it, but I don't want to do it anymore." "What do you want?" Hannah thought about the ER at St. Aurora, about Sarah and Patel, and the patients who needed someone who wouldn't fold, about doing work that mattered without having to hide who she was. "I want to be a nurse, just a nurse. No cover story, no double life, just the work." Reyes studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Okay. That's it? Just okay?" "You've earned it, Blake. You've done more in 18 months than most operatives do in a career. If you want out, you're out." She pulled a document from her drawer and slid it across the desk. "Sign here. Effective immediately, you're discharged, honorably, full benefits, clean record." Hannah picked up the pen. Her hand hovered over the signature line. This was it, the end of one life, the beginning of another. She signed. Reyes took the document and filed it. "Good luck, Blake." "Thanks." Hannah turned to leave. "Blake?" She looked back. "If you ever change your mind," Reyes said, "you know where to find me." Hannah smiled. "I won't, ought." 2 weeks later, Hannah walked into the ER at St. Aurora Medical Center for the first time as just Hannah Blake, RN. No hidden agenda, no classified mission, just a nurse showing up for her shift. Sarah saw her first and screamed, "You're back!" The entire ER turned. Patel came out of her office. Kira dropped the chart she was holding. Hayes walked over from the trauma bay, arms crossed, trying to look stern, but failing. "You actually came back," Hayes said. "I said I would. People say a lot of things." Hannah shrugged. "I'm not most people." Hayes' expression softened. "No, you're not." She held out a hand. "Welcome home." Hannah shook it, and for the first time in years the word felt true. She spent the rest of the shift doing what she did best, treating patients, running codes, keeping people alive. No drama, no hidden agendas, just medicine. At the end of the shift, she was restocking a supply cart when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. "Blake," a familiar voice. "Lieutenant Blake, this is Major Ellis. I wanted to give you an update on Dr. Garrett." Hannah's chest tightened. "Is he okay?" "He's more than okay. He's being discharged from Walter Reed next week. Full recovery. He wanted me to pass along a message." "What message?" "He's going back to his work. Says he's got about 20 years of vaccine distribution left in him, and he's not wasting any more time. He also said, and I'm quoting here, 'Tell that crazy nurse she saved more than my life. She reminded me why it was worth saving.'" Hannah's throat closed up. She couldn't speak. Ellis continued. "He wants to meet you. When you're ready. No pressure. Tell him." Hannah paused, found her voice. "Tell him I'm glad he's okay, and I'll take him up on that meeting someday." "Will do. Take care of yourself, Blake." The line went dead. Hannah stood in the supply room, phone in hand, trying to process the fact that she'd actually done it, saved a life, exposed corruption, changed a system, and walked away clean. Sarah poked her head in. "You good?" "Yeah." Hannah wiped her eyes. "Yeah, I'm good. Shift's over. A few of us are grabbing food. You coming?" Hannah looked at her, at the ER beyond, at the life she'd chosen over the shadows. "Yeah," she said. "I'm coming." They walked out together into the cool night air, talking and laughing like normal people who hadn't just saved 6 lives in 12 hours. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Hannah Blake felt like she was exactly where she belonged. But as she walked to her car, her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then she did. "Blake." Silence. Then a voice she didn't recognize. Digitally altered, flat, cold. "You made a mistake coming back." Hannah stopped walking. "Who is this?" "Someone who knows what you did, who you really are, and what you cost us. Her hand tightened on the phone. What are you talking about? St. Aurora wasn't just a hospital, Lieutenant. It was a pipeline, and you broke it. Now people want answers, people who don't forgive. The line went dead. Hannah stood in the parking lot, heart pounding, staring at her phone. She thought it was over, thought she'd walked away clean. But as she looked back at the hospital, at the people inside who trusted her, who thought she was just a nurse, she realized the truth. Some fights don't end when you want them to. They end when someone decides you've paid enough. And Hannah Blake had just been told her bill was still outstanding. Hannah didn't go home. She drove straight to the one place she knew had surveillance and security protocols that actually worked. The federal building downtown where the investigation into St. Aurora had been coordinated. She showed her ID to the night guard, explained she had a credible threat, and asked to speak to whoever was on duty from the task force. 20 minutes later, she was sitting across from Agent Michelle Voss, the same woman who'd led the evidence collection at the hospital. Voss looked annoyed at being called in at midnight until Hannah played the voicemail. Voss's expression changed. "Play it again." Hannah did. The digitally altered voice filled the small office. "St. Aurora wasn't just a hospital, Lieutenant. It was a pipeline, and you broke it." Voss stopped the recording. "When did you receive this?" 40 minutes ago. "Have you gotten any other threats? Messages? Anything unusual?" "No, just this." Voss pulled up a terminal and started typing. "We shut down Tennant's operation, arrested him and 2 other physicians involved in the falsification ring. But if someone's calling you about a pipeline, they're talking about something bigger." She looked at Hannah. "Did you see anything at St. Aurora that suggested organized crime, money laundering, drug diversion?" Hannah thought back to her 18 months embedded. "No, just medical negligence and a culture of covering it up." "You're sure?" "I documented everything. If there was something criminal beyond the malpractice, I would have flagged it." Voss leaned back. "Then either this is someone connected to Tennant trying to intimidate you, or there's a layer to this we didn't catch." "What kind of layer?" "Well, what kind of..." "The kind that uses hospitals as fronts. Billing fraud feeding offshore accounts. Patient records fabricated to justify insurance claims. Even organ trafficking, though that's rare." Voss paused. "St. Aurora's parent company runs 12 hospitals across 4 states. If someone was using that network for illegal activity, shutting down one location wouldn't stop them. It'd just make them angry." Hannah's stomach turned. "You think I stumbled into something bigger than Tennant?" "I think someone's worried you might have, and they want you to know they're watching." Voss made copies of the voicemail and escalated it to the cyber team. They traced the number, burner phone, activated 3 hours ago, already offline. Dead end. But Voss assigned a patrol to drive past Hannah's apartment every 2 hours and told her to report anything suspicious. "Don't engage if they contact you again," Voss said. "Forward it to me immediately. We'll handle it." Hannah nodded, but as she left the building, she knew one thing for certain. Whoever made that call wasn't going to wait for the feds to track them down. They wanted her scared, isolated, vulnerable. She wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. The next morning, Hannah showed up for her shift at St. Aurora like nothing had happened. Sarah noticed immediately. "You look like you didn't sleep." "I didn't." "Everything okay?" Hannah almost told her. Almost explained the call, the threat, the possibility that the hospital they worked at had been part of something worse than they'd imagined. But Sarah had already been through enough. They all had. So Hannah just smiled and said, "Long night, I'm fine." She wasn't fine. She was running on adrenaline and coffee, scanning every face that walked through the ER doors, wondering if one of them was connected to the voice on the phone. But she kept working, kept moving, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant spiraling. At noon, Patel pulled her aside. "We got a patient in Bay 4 asking for you specifically." Hannah frowned. "Who?" "Didn't give a name, just said he knows you and needs to talk, privately." Every instinct Hannah had screamed trap, but she grabbed a pair of gloves and walked to Bay 4 anyway. The man sitting on the exam table was in his 60s, well-dressed, with silver hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He wasn't injured, wasn't sick. He was just sitting there, waiting. Hannah stopped in the doorway. "I don't know you." "No." But I know you, Lieutenant Blake. His voice was smooth, controlled, nothing like the distorted voice from the call. My name is Victor Caldwell. I'm the former CFO of MedCorp Holdings, the parent company that owns St. Aurora and 11 other hospitals. Hannah's hand moved instinctively toward the panic button on the wall. If you're here to threaten me, I'm here to warn you. Caldwell stood slowly, hands visible. The call you received last night came from people I used to work with. People who used our hospital network to move money. A lot of money. Move it where? Offshore accounts, shell corporations. We'd bill insurers for procedures that never happened, inflate equipment costs, and pocket the difference. It was clean, efficient. Until you exposed Tennant. Hannah's pulse hammered. Tennant was part of this? Tennant was a useful idiot. He thought he was just cutting corners to save the hospital money. He had no idea his protocols were designed to create billing opportunities, fake patient stays, unnecessary tests. The negligence wasn't a bug. It was a feature. Hannah felt sick. How many people died because of this? I don't know. I stopped counting. Caldwell's expression didn't change. When the federal investigation started, I got out, took what I could and disappeared. But my former partners? They're still operating, and they're furious that you shut down one of their most profitable nodes. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm dying. Caldwell pulled back his sleeve, revealing a hospital bracelet from another facility. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I've got maybe 3 months, and I'd like to spend them knowing I did one decent thing before I go. He handed her a USB drive. Everything's on here, bank records, shell companies, names, locations, enough to take down the entire network. Hannah stared at the drive. Why not go to the feds yourself? Because I'm implicated in all of it. The moment I hand this over, I'm arrested. But you? You're a witness, a whistleblower. They can't touch you without exposing themselves. He pressed the drive into her hand. Take it. Finish what you started. Before Hannah could respond, Caldwell walked out of the bay and disappeared into the hospital crowd. Hannah stood there, holding the USB drive, her mind racing. This was bigger than Tennant, bigger than St. Aurora. This was a coordinated criminal enterprise using sick people as cover for fraud. And now she had proof that she didn't wait. She called Voss from the hospital parking lot and explained everything. Voss told her to stay put. Agents were en route. 20 minutes later, Hannah was in the back of an SUV with Voss and 2 other agents, heading to a secure location where they could examine the drive without risk of interception. The data was damning. Spreadsheets showing fake patient admissions, invoices for equipment that was never purchased, wire transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands, and names, physicians, executives, board members, all connected to the fraud. Voss whistled low. This is a RICO case. We're talking decades of prison time for everyone involved. How long until you can move on them? Hannah asked. We'll need to verify the data, cross-reference it with our own investigation, and build a case that'll hold up in court. 2 weeks, minimum. That's too long. They already know I'm a threat. If they figure out I have this, we'll protect you. Safe house, new identity if necessary. Hannah shook her head. I'm not hiding. I've spent the last year of my life pretending to be someone else. I'm done with that. Blake, these people are dangerous. They've already threatened you once. And I'm still standing, so I'll keep standing until you take them down. Voss studied her. You're stubborn. I'm tired of bad people getting away with hurting patients because no one wants to fight back. Voss sighed. Fine, but you take precautions. No solo shifts, no isolated locations. And if anything feels wrong, you call me immediately. Hannah agreed. But as she left the federal building, she knew the real fight was just beginning. The arrest started 72 hours later. FBI agents hit 5 hospitals simultaneously, walking executives out in handcuffs while news cameras rolled. MedCorp Holdings CEO was arrested at his home in Connecticut. 2 board members were detained at an airport trying to flee to Switzerland. The scale of the operation made national headlines. Massive healthcare fraud ring exposed. Hospitals used as cover for $300 million scheme. Hannah watched the coverage from the ER break room. Sarah and Patel stood beside her, stunned. They were stealing from patients, Sarah whispered, the whole time. Not just stealing, Hannah said. Killing them. Every time they inflated a cost or faked a procedure, they took resources away from actual care. People died because someone wanted a bigger yacht. Patel's hands clenched into fists. Tennant knew. Tennant was a pawn. The real players were higher up. The TV cut to footage of Victor Caldwell being escorted into a courthouse. He looked smaller than Hannah remembered, frailer. The caption read, "Former CFO turns state's evidence in exchange for reduced sentence." "Is that the guy who gave you the information?" Sarah asked. Hannah nodded. "Why'd he do it?" "Because dying gives you clarity, makes you realize what actually matters." The news shifted to an interview with Agent Voss. She stood in front of the federal building, reporters shouting questions. "Can you confirm that the whistleblower in this case was the same operative who exposed violations at St. Aurora Medical Center?" Voss's expression was stone. "I can confirm that multiple sources provided critical information. Beyond that, I won't comment on ongoing investigations." "Is the operative in danger?" "All individuals who assist federal investigations are afforded full protection under the law." The questions kept coming, but Voss ended the interview and walked away. Sarah turned to Hannah. "They're talking about you, aren't they?" "They're not supposed to, but they are. Everyone knows. You're the one who blew this open." Hannah didn't respond. She just watched the screen as more executives were paraded in front of cameras, their faces pale, their lawyers shouting, "No comment." This was justice, real, public, undeniable justice. But it didn't feel like victory. Not yet. What? That night, Hannah's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then she did. "Blake." The same digitally altered voice. But this time, it sounded different, strained, panicked. "You destroyed us." Hannah's grip tightened on the phone. "You destroyed yourselves. I just made sure people found out. You have no idea what you've done. The people we worked with, they don't forgive. They don't forget. Then they can come find me. I'll be right here." "You think you're safe because the feds arrested a few executives? You're not. This goes deeper than you know." "Then I'll keep digging until I find the bottom." Silence. Then the voice changed, no longer robotic, just human, angry, desperate. "Why couldn't you just stay quiet?" Hannah's jaw tightened. "Because people died, and someone needed to care enough to do something about it." The line went dead. Hannah sat in her car, staring at the phone. She knew this wasn't over. There would be more calls, more threats, maybe even attempts on her life. But she also knew something else. She'd spent years being afraid. Afraid of failing, afraid of making the wrong call, afraid of the cost of doing the right thing. She wasn't afraid anymore. 2 weeks later, Hannah was called to testify before a grand jury. She walked into the courthouse flanked by federal agents, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. She didn't answer any of them, just walked inside head high and told the truth. She testified for 6 hours, explained her embedded mission at St. Aurora, described what she'd seen, presented the evidence she'd gathered, and when the prosecutors asked her why she'd risked her career to expose the fraud, she gave them the simplest answer she had. Because it was the right thing to do. The grand jury indicted 17 people. The trial would take months, maybe years, but the outcome was inevitable. Too much evidence, too many witnesses, too many lives destroyed by greed. When Hannah walked out of the courthouse, Voss was waiting. "You did good in there." "I just told the truth." "That's harder than it sounds." Voss paused. "We've been monitoring chatter. The threats have stopped. Whoever was behind them either got arrested or decided you're not worth the risk. So I'm safe. As safe as anyone who takes on a criminal organization can be. But Blake?" Voss's expression softened. "You ended something that had been running for over a decade. You saved lives. That matters." Hannah nodded. "What happens now?" "Now you go back to your life. Be a nurse. Help people. Let us handle the rest." Hannah wanted to believe it was that simple, but she knew better. The work was never really done. There would always be another tenant, another system that prioritized profit over patients, another fight worth having. But for the first time in years, she felt like she had the strength to keep fighting. Jack. The following Monday, Hannah walked into St. Aurora for her shift. The ER had changed in the weeks since the arrests. New leadership, new protocols, new energy. People actually smiled. Nurses talked openly about safety concerns without fear of retaliation. Patients were treated like human beings, not billing opportunities. Sarah caught her at the nurse's station. "Did you see the memo?" "What memo?" Sarah handed her a tablet. It was an email from the new hospital CEO, sent to all staff. To the team at St. Aurora, the past year has been the most difficult in our institution's history. We failed our patients. We failed our staff. We allowed a culture of negligence and corruption to take root, and people suffered because of it. But change is possible. Accountability is possible. And it starts with recognizing the courage of those who refuse to stay silent. While I cannot name them publicly, I want every person in this hospital to know you were heard, your voices mattered. And because of you, we have the chance to rebuild something better. Thank you. Hannah read it twice, then handed the tablet back. "That's about you," Sarah said. "That's about all of us." "Don't do that. Don't downplay what you did." Hannah looked at her. "I didn't do it alone. You testified. Patel testified. Even Cross, in his own way, told the truth. We all carried it." Sarah's eyes shone. "I've worked in healthcare for 20 years. I've seen people burn out, quit, or just stop caring. But you? You never stopped, even when it would have been easier to walk away." "I couldn't walk away. Not from this." "I know, that's what makes you different." Before Hannah could respond, the ER doors burst open. Paramedics rushed in with a trauma patient, car accident, critical injuries, chaos erupting in seconds. Hannah and Sarah moved as one, falling into the rhythm they'd built over months of working together. The rest of the shift blurred into a series of saves, near misses, and small victories. A child with a broken arm who left smiling. An elderly man whose heart rhythm they stabilized just in time. A young woman in diabetic ketoacidosis who walked out 3 days later because they caught it early. This was the work, not the headlines or the testimony or the justice. This, keeping people alive one patient at a time. At the end of the shift, Hannah sat in the break room, exhausted but steady. Hayes walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Hannah and sat down. "You're really staying?" "I said I would." "People say a lot of things." Hannah smiled. "You already used that line." "It's still true." Hayes sipped her coffee. "You know, when you first showed up here, I thought you were too quiet, too passive. I figured you'd quit within a month." "I almost did, several times." "But you didn't." "No, I didn't." Hayes looked at her for a long moment. "Thank you for everything you did, not just exposing the fraud, but for showing us that we could fight back. A lot of people forgot that was possible." Hannah's throat tightened. "I didn't do it for thanks." "I know, but you're getting it anyway." They sat in comfortable silence, drinking bad coffee and listening to the sounds of the ER humming back to life. Monitors beeping, nurses laughing, patients being cared for the way they should have been all along. A month later, Hannah received a package at the hospital. No return address, just her name and a postmark from Washington, D.C. Inside was a medal. The Civilian Service Medal, awarded for extraordinary contributions to public safety. Attached was a letter from the Department of Justice. "Lieutenant Hannah Blake, your actions in exposing systemic fraud and corruption within the healthcare system prevented immeasurable harm and brought justice to those who exploited the vulnerable. Your courage, integrity, and unwavering commitment to the truth exemplify the highest standards of public service. While much of your work must remain classified, please know that your contributions have not gone unnoticed." Hannah stared at the medal. It felt heavy in her hand, heavier than it should have been. She thought about pinning it to her uniform, displaying it somewhere. Then she put it back in the box and slid it into her locker. This wasn't about recognition. It never had been. Later that week, she got a call from Dr. Michael Garrett. He was back at work, running a mobile clinic in rural communities, doing the same work that had gotten him kidnapped in the first place. "I wanted to check in," he said. "See how you're doing." "I'm good. Busy. The usual." "I heard about the trial. Sounds like you've been busy with more than just nursing." Hannah laughed. "Something like that. I'm proud of you. Not a lot of people would have done what you did." "You did. You kept trying to help people even after they tortured you." That's different. I'm stubborn. So am I. Garrett chuckled. Yeah, I noticed. He paused. Listen, if you ever want a change of scenery, I could use someone with your skills out here. Field medicine, mobile clinics. It's hard work, but it's honest. Hannah thought about it. The idea of leaving St. Aurora, going somewhere new, starting fresh. It was tempting. But as she looked around the ER, at Sarah restocking supplies, at Patel coordinating patient care, at the system they'd all fought so hard to fix, she realized she wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. I appreciate the offer, but I think I'm needed here for a while longer. Fair enough, but if you change your mind, the door's open. After they hung up, Hannah stood at the nurse's station and watched the ER move around her. Patients coming in. Staff working together. Lives being saved in small, quiet ways that would never make headlines. This was what she'd been fighting for. Not the arrests or the trials or the justice, but this. A hospital that actually cared about healing people. Sarah walked over. You okay? You've been staring at the wall for 5 minutes. Just thinking. About what? Hannah smiled. About how far we've come. Sarah followed her gaze, looking at the ER they'd helped rebuild. Yeah, we have, haven't we? Yeah, we have. 6 months later, St. Aurora held a staff memorial for the patients who'd died due to negligence. It was Hayes's idea, a way to acknowledge what had happened and commit to doing better. The hospital's courtyard was filled with people, families, staff, community members. Hannah stood in the back, watching. She didn't make a speech. Didn't want the spotlight. But as the names were read, Robert Callahan, Margaret Torres, David Kim, and dozens more, she felt the weight of everyone. These were the people she'd fought for, the ones who couldn't fight for themselves. After the ceremony, a woman approached her, late 50s, eyes red from crying. You're Hannah Blake. Hannah nodded. I'm Robert Callahan's widow. I wanted to thank you. Hannah's breath caught. I'm sorry I couldn't save him. You couldn't, but you made sure what happened to him meant something. You made sure it wouldn't happen to someone else's husband. That matters. The woman hugged her. Hannah stood there, frozen, then slowly hugged her back. When the woman pulled away, she said, My husband was a good man. He deserved better than what this place gave him. But because of you, other families won't have to go through what I did. Thank you for caring enough to fight. Hannah couldn't speak. She just nodded. As the crowd dispersed, Hayes walked over. You good? I don't know. Hayes put a hand on her shoulder. You saved this place, Blake. Don't forget that. I didn't save it. We all did. Maybe. But you started it. And that's the hardest part. That night, Hannah sat on the roof of her apartment building, looking out at the city. Lights stretched to the horizon. Somewhere out there, people were getting hurt, sick, dying, and somewhere, people were fighting to save them. She thought about everything that had happened, the lies, the threats, the moments she'd almost quit, and the moments she'd decided to keep going despite everything. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been clean, but it had been worth it. Her phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. Tomorrow's going to be hell. 3 nurses called in sick. You ready? Hannah smiled and typed back. Always. She stood up, stretched, and headed back inside. Tomorrow would be hard. The day after that, harder. There would always be fights worth having, systems worth challenging, people worth saving. But Hannah Blake had learned something over the past 2 years, something that no amount of combat training or undercover work had taught her. The hardest battles aren't fought with weapons. They're fought with persistence, with the quiet refusal to look away when everyone else does, with the willingness to stand up, speak out, and take the hit if it means someone else doesn't have to. She'd been called weak, soft, incapable. People had underestimated her because she didn't raise her voice or demand attention. But strength isn't loud. It's showing up every day, even when it hurts. It's doing the right thing when no one's watching. It's carrying the weight that everyone else walks past because you know if you don't, no one else will. Hannah had been invisible for so long. A quiet nurse in the background while louder voices took credit and made decisions. But invisible doesn't mean powerless, and quiet doesn't mean weak. She walked into her apartment, set her keys on the counter, and looked at her reflection in the window. A soldier who'd learned to fight without raising a fist. A nurse who'd saved lives by refusing to stay silent. A woman who'd been underestimated her entire life, and used it to change a system that thought it was untouchable. They saw a nurse. They missed the warrior who'd been there all along. And now, finally, they knew. Not because she'd demanded recognition, but because the truth, her truth, had become impossible to ignore. Hannah Blake turned off the light and went to bed. Tomorrow, she'd do it all over again. Because that's what warriors do. They keep fighting, even when no one's watching, especially when no one's watching. Because the people who need you most are the ones who can't fight for themselves. And someone has to stand in the gap. Someone has to care. Hannah had decided a long time ago that someone would be her. And she'd never looked back,